It was August 1975. In a packed arena in North Carolina, Elvis was halfway through the wonder of you when he stopped cold, his eyes locked on a woman near the stage. Not a screaming fan, but a quiet figure clutching a worn leather purse. The king took a breath and started walking toward her. Before we go on, if you believe small acts can change a life forever, stay with me to the end. This story proves why Elvis's kindness is still talked about today. The heat inside the arena was thick, spotlights carved through faint swirls of cigarette smoke, landing in pools of gold on the stage. The band was locked in. James Burton's guitar licks darted between the deep thump of the bass. The hiss from the amplifiers never faded, like static under every note. Elvis moved with that easy swagger, sweat glistening at his temples. Each turn of his head sent a wave of cheers rolling forward from the back rows. Down in the first section, the crowd was a blur of waving arms and camera flashes, but near the front row 3, just off center, sat a woman in her late 50s. Her hands rested still over a folded paper ticket. She didn't sing along. She didn't move. She just watched. Elvis's gaze swept over her once. Then again, his brow knit, just slightly before smoothing back into his performance face. But his next line came late. According to witnesses, he turned toward the band and gave a small hand signal. The music faltered. The crowd's cheers softened to confused murmurs. The rhythm section shifted into a slow vamp, buying time. From the wings, stagehands glanced at each other. They'd seen Elvis interact with fans before, but not like this, not with the music hanging mid-air. He stepped down the short staircase at stage right, microphone still in his hand. His white jumpsuit shimmered under the spot as he crossed the gap toward her. Phones didn't exist yet, but dozens of Instamatics went up. Each flash caught tiny dust motes in the beam of light between them. The woman blinked, unsure whether to stand or stay seated. Elvis bent forward slightly, resting one hand on the stage barrier. The crowd strained to hear. He leaned in close. His lips moved. Only she could hear the words. Her eyes widened, then her hand went to her mouth. The woman's breath caught. Her shoulders tensed. Then, a small, disbelieving smile formed. Elvis straightened, microphone close enough for the first row to hear. "Miss Gordon." His voice was steady, but there was something softer in it, like he was speaking to an old friend. A ripple moved through the crowd. People glanced at each other. Who was she? Some say her hands began to tremble as she nodded. She seemed half in shock, half afraid she was mistaken. Elvis's grin widened. He took a half step back, as if to let the crowd see her fully. "This," he told them, his voice carrying now, "is the lady who taught me to believe I could do something with my life." Gasps broke out, followed by an excited murmur that rolled through the arena like wind through leaves. Flashbulbs burst, freezing moments in stark white frames. Her teary smile, his steady gaze, their shared connection in the middle of all that noise. "She told me I had something the world should hear," Elvis said, "and she was right." Miss Gordon covered her mouth, shaking her head as if to deny credit, but her eyes glistened in the spotlight. She laughed through the tears, looking down, then back up at him. The band, catching on, held a soft chord, drums muted, bass humming low, as if the entire show had paused to hold this moment. From the nosebleeds to the VIP pit, people leaned forward. A few fans in the front row reached for tissue. The cameras, big, shoulder-mounted machines, swung in to catch every detail. The worn leather purse on her lap, the small gold pin on her jacket, the way her eyes didn't leave his face. Elvis crouched slightly to meet her at eye level. "Miss Gordon," he said, "I wouldn't be here without you." A roar of applause swelled, almost drowning out his last words. She mouthed something back. "Maybe I'm proud of you." The lighting tech, sensing the moment, brought down the stage washes and tightened the spot on the two of them. The rest of the arena slipped into dimness. In that pool of white light, It was just Elvis and his old teacher, two people with decades between their last meeting, connected again in front of thousands. He stood, turning toward the band, his free hand went up, fingers flicking in a signal they knew well. The drummer counted in under his breath, but Elvis cut him off. "Not yet," he said. The crowd's anticipation tightened like a drawn bowstring. He looked back at her, then back to the band, and said into the mic, "We're doing this one for her." The guitarist slid into the first notes of a song, but it wasn't the one they'd played earlier that night. The first few notes floated out, slow, deliberate, not the up-tempo version the band usually played. The lighting crew dimmed the arena to near darkness. A single white spotlight poured down over Elvis, catching the shimmer of rhinestones on his jumpsuit. Every movement made tiny pinpricks of light scatter across the stage. Miss Gordon sat frozen, her eyes reflecting the beam. Around her, people leaned back into their seats, instinctively quiet. Elvis lifted the mic with both hands, closed his eyes for a second, then began, "The Wonder of You." His voice was softer now, the vibrato lingering on each note. This wasn't a showman belting for the cheap seats. This was a man singing to one person. From the back of the arena, you could see her shoulders tremble. She pulled a tissue from her purse, pressing it to the corner of her eyes. The tissue shook slightly in her hand. Camera operators crept closer, zooming in on the contrast. His steady gaze from the stage, her emotional stillness in the crowd. On the second verse, Elvis shifted his stance, so his body faced her directly. His left hand gripped the mic stand, the right resting over his chest. "Your love to me is everything." Some in the audience swayed in place, others just watched silently, as if afraid to interrupt. The sound system carried every breath, every catch in his throat. At one line, his voice cracked, not from a missed note, but from emotion breaking through. The band stayed restrained, brushes on the snare instead of sticks, bass barely above a murmur, strings humming softly in the background. Miss Gordon dabbed her eyes again. For a moment, she smiled. One of those small, proud smiles you give a student who's done something extraordinary. As the bridge came, Elvis stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Without breaking eye contact, he reached down. The crowd parted just enough for her to stand. She rose slowly, a little unsteady, her hands clutching the front rail. When the chorus swelled again, he reached out and took her hand in his. His palm closed over hers, firm but gentle. He sang the final lines like they were meant for her alone. The spotlight tightened, isolating the two of them in a world of white light. When the last note faded, there was a half-second of silence before the crowd erupted. The applause started in the front rows and rolled backward like a wave hitting shore. Elvis didn't let go of her hand immediately. He gave it a small squeeze before finally stepping back. The cameras panned over fans wiping tears, couples holding each other, strangers exchanging glances that said, "Did you just see that?" He gave a small nod to the band. They dropped the last chord and let the sound hang in the rafter. But instead of launching into the next song on the set list, Elvis turned toward stage right. He made a subtle hand motion to Sonny West, his longtime friend and bodyguard, who had been watching from the shadows. Sonny's expression shifted, like he knew what was coming but hadn't been expecting it now. He disappeared behind the curtain for a few seconds. The crowd, still buzzing from the performance, began to settle again, sensing something unusual was about to happen. When Sonny reappeared, he wasn't empty-handed. In his grip, a small black velvet box. But the real shock came after the song. When Elvis signaled to his bodyguard, Sonny stepped forward, handing the box to Elvis, who held it in his palm, eyes locked on Miss Gordon. Elvis flipped open the lid of the velvet box. Inside, under the stage lights, something gleamed. He looked down at it for a moment, then back at her. "Miss Gordon," he said into the mic, "I think you should have this." Gasps rippled through the arena. He stepped closer to the barrier and held out the box so she could see. Nestled inside was a gold bracelet, its surface catching the light. On the inside, in small neat engraving, "To Miss Gordon, with love, EP." Witnesses say she shook her head, mouthing Elvis just smiled, motioning for her to lift her wrist. She hesitated, just long enough for the crowd to lean forward, then slowly extended her arm. Elvis reached down, clasping the bracelet around her wrist himself. His fingers lingered a moment, pressing the latch close. The gold contrasted against her skin, warm from the stage lights. The audience broke into applause, some standing, others snapping quick photos. But Elvis wasn't done. In one smooth motion, he reached to the chain around his own neck, the diamond-studded TCB pendant he was rarely seen without. With a small tug, he unhooked it. The gold chain slid free, catching flashes from the cameras as it fell into his hand. He bent forward again, placing the pendant in her palm. "For everything you gave me," he said quietly. Miss Gordon covered her face with her other hand. Then her knees buckled, and she dropped to the ground in front of the rail. The crowd gasped, some calling out her name, others just clapping harder, as if to hold her up with sound. Cameras zoomed in, the pendant lying in her hand, the bracelet shining on her wrist, the tears slipping between her fingers. Elvis crouched at the stage edge, reaching out until she steadied herself. She stood again, shakily, wiping at her chin. From the second row, a fan yelled, "We love you, Miss Gordon." The crowd laughed and cheered at once, the kind of shared moment that only happens when everyone is caught up in the same emotion. The band, still holding their instruments, hadn't played a note in over 2 minutes. They stood quietly, some smiling to themselves. Elvis glanced toward the side of the stage again, giving Sonny a second nod. Sonny leaned in, and Elvis whispered something into his ear. His voice didn't carry, but whatever he said made Sonny's eyebrows lift in surprise. He gave a quick salute-like gesture and disappeared backstage. The arena, sensing another twist, hushed again. The tension felt almost electric. 18,000 people leaning in, waiting. Miss Gordon, still holding the pendant tightly, looked from Elvis to the wings, unsure of what was happening next. Elvis gave her a reassuring nod, then stepped back toward center stage. The spotlight followed him, leaving her in a soft halo of sidelight. The band leader glanced his way for a cue. Elvis shook his head, smiling, and spoke into the mic. "Folks, we're just getting started." The crowd roared again, not knowing exactly why, but happy to be part of it. And yet, that wasn't the last surprise Elvis had for her. In the shadows at stage right, Sonny reappeared, this time gesturing for Miss Gordon to follow him. Miss Gordon hesitated, glancing at Elvis for confirmation. He nodded again, mouthing, "Go on." Sonny extended his hand to help her over the barrier. The front row made space, offering encouraging smiles as she stepped carefully toward the side stage. The sound changed immediately. Out front, the crowd still cheered, but backstage, the roar became a muffled, distant hum. They walked down a narrow corridor lined with black drapes. The air smelled faintly of sweat, stage makeup, and the lingering sweetness of someone's cologne. Elvis, a stagehand in a headset, gave a curious look, but stepped aside as Sonny led her into a small lounge. It was quiet here, just the low hum of an air conditioner, and the faint rattle of ice in a nearby cooler. A moment later, Elvis stepped in, wiping his face with a towel. His jumpsuit collar loosened slightly. Without the bright lights, he seemed more like the young man she once knew, still confident, but softer at the edges. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." His voice was calmer now, without the stage projection, just a simple truth between them. She smiled, shaking her head. "I didn't think you'd remember me." Elvis chuckled. "Remember you? You're the reason I stood up in front of anyone in the first place." From the table beside him, he picked up a plain white envelope. No flourish, no showmanship, just held it out to her. "Open it," he said. Inside was a first-class ticket to Las Vegas. Tucked behind it, a hotel reservation slip, and 2 front-row passes for his next show. "You'll never wait in line for me again," Elvis told her. "Wherever I'm playing, you've got a seat." Her eyes watered again, but this time she didn't look away. She stepped forward and hugged him, longer than a polite embrace, tighter than a casual one. For a few seconds, neither moved. No cameras, no audience, just the weight of years bridged in silence. When they pulled back, Elvis gave her a smile that was part gratitude, part farewell. Sonny reappeared in the doorway, giving a subtle signal that the next set was ready. Elvis turned to Miss Gordon. "You go on ahead," he said. "They'll take you wherever you want to sit, or you can stay here and wait for me to finish." She laughed. "I think I'll watch you work." He grinned, gave her hand one last squeeze and headed back toward the stage. But it was what arrived at her doorstep a week later that became family legend. 7 days later, a delivery truck rumbled up the quiet street where Miss Gordon lived. Her modest home sat beneath a shade tree, with wind chimes that swayed in the summer. She stepped onto the porch, puzzled. She hadn't ordered anything. 2 men in work shirts carried a large wooden crate up the walkway. One of them checked a clipboard. "Delivery for Miss Gordon," he said. She signed, still unsure what this was. The men pried the crate open with crowbars, the nails squealing as they gave way. Inside, wrapped in thick cloth, was a gleaming upright piano. The mahogany surface reflected the afternoon light, smooth and perfect. Taped to the front was an envelope. The handwriting was bold, a little slanted, familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. She slid the note free and unfolded it. The paper was Graceland stationery. "So you can keep inspiring kids to dream. You'll always have a seat in the front row." Elvis. Her hands trembled. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the words. She stepped inside and ran her fingers over the keys. The sound was warm and rich, the kind of tone that fills a room without effort. Memories rushed in. Teenagers in worn desks, her voice urging them to speak louder during presentations, to believe their words mattered, and one shy boy in the back row, who sang with his head down, until she told him to lift it. She laughed softly, shaking her head. He remembered. She whispered. Her granddaughter, just a little girl then, would later tell people she'd never seen her grandmother cry like that. Not out of sadness, but something else. The note stayed on the piano for weeks, until Miss Gordon finally framed. She put it on the wall above the instrument, right where she could see it every time she played. Years passed. The bracelet, the pendant, the piano, they all stayed in the family. Her granddaughter, now grown, still keeps the note in the same frame, the ink slightly faded, but the words as powerful as the day they were written. For Miss Gordon, it wasn't about the gold or the music or even the seat in the front row. It was about a circle completed, a reminder that the kindness you give has a way of finding its way back to you, sometimes in ways you could never imagine. Gratitude never fades. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes that even the smallest act of belief can change a life forever. Who's the one person you'd thank if you had the chance to do it in front of the world?